One of the January 6th defendants is about to go to jail for a very long time
for stealing a coat rack.
Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and this is Winnie the Westie. And for any of you out there asking, Winnie the Westie is already blind. He was blind from birth, so I don't need to cut his hair because he can't see out of his eyes in the first place. Now, there have been even more developments in the January 6th defendants. After one January 6th defendant was found innocent, another January 6th defendant has been found guilty by a jury for obstructing government proceedings and for stealing a coat rack. And based on some of the things the judge said in the context of this case,
I have a bad feeling this guy is going to jail for a long time.
You'll recall that one of the defendants to the events of January 6th, the so-called QAnon shaman, he was sentenced to 41 months in prison for his involvement that day. Another one of the January 6th defendants, a literal grandmother named Anna Morgan Lloyd, who pleaded guilty, was sentenced to something like 40 hours community service, 3 years probation, and a $500 fine. Well, this week we got news of one of the January 6th defendants who was found guilty after his trial by a jury, and he is up for sentencing in the near future. And based on some of the things the judge said in the context of that trial, I have a bad feeling this guy's going to jail for a long time, and we've got people who want to park here. It's a Saturday, my kid's at a play date, and I am parked across the street making this vlog in the car because this is news the world needs to know about. From CTV News, World News, U.S. Capitol rioter who said he followed Trump's, quote, orders, end quote, found guilty. Published April 14, 2022, updated April 15, 2022 by the Associated Press. Washington, an Ohio man who claimed he was only, quote, following presidential orders, end quote, from Donald Trump when he stormed the U.S. Capitol was convicted by a jury that took less than 3 hours to reject his novel defense for obstructing Congress from certifying Joe Biden's presidential victory. The federal jury on Thursday also found Dustin Byron Thompson, 38, guilty of all 5 of the other charges in his indictment, including stealing a coat rack from an office inside the Capitol during the riot on Jan 6, 2021. The maximum sentence for the obstruction count, the lone felony, would be 20 years imprisonment. Setting aside how you might feel about the charge itself of obstructing Congress, whether or not the events of that day fall within the ambit of what was intended to be covered by the charge of obstructing Congress, this guy also had the poor judgment of stealing a coat rack, and I have a feeling that's going to come back to haunt him. But before we get there, let's just hear what one of the jurors had to say in this case, because right after the conviction, one of the jurors immediately went to the media. Jurors didn't buy Thompson's defense, in which he blamed Trump and members of the president's inner circle for the insurrection and for his own actions. One juror who spoke to reporters only on condition of anonymity said, quote, Donald Trump wasn't on trial in this case, end quote. Yeah, insurrection. And this juror who ran right to the media to say Donald Trump wasn't on trial in this case, wait until you see what this juror says right after that. The juror, a 40-year-old man, said as he left the courthouse, quote, everyone agrees that Donald Trump is culpable as an overall narrative. Lots of people were there and then went home. Dustin Thompson did not, end quote. Yeah, this juror assures us that Donald Trump was not on trial in this case because everyone agrees that Donald Trump was culpable as an overall narrative.
Let that sink in.
And then let's see what the defendant himself has to say as he threw himself on the mercy of the court only to get convicted on all charges. Thompson himself, testifying a day earlier, admitted he joined the mob's attack and stole the coat rack and a bottle of bourbon. He said he regretted his, quote, disgraceful, end quote, behavior. Quote, I can't believe the things that I did, end quote, he said. Quote, mob mentality and groupthink is very real and very dangerous, end quote. And if you want to see a quintessential example of narrative journalism, wait until you see how this next sentence is crafted. Still, he said he believed Trump's false claim that the election was stolen and was trying to stand up for him. Quote, if the president is giving you almost an order to do something, I felt obligated to do that, end quote, he said. Bias is to be expected from the media. It's almost par for the course these days. One does not expect it quite so much from the court, although we have grown to expect bias from the courts as well. But wait until you hear some of the things this judge said in the context of this file. It really leaves you with the impression that this guy is going to jail for a very long time. U.S. District Judge Reggie Walton, who is scheduled to sentence Thompson on July 20, described the defendant's testimony as, quote, totally disingenuous, end quote, and his conduct on Jan 6 as, quote, reprehensible, end quote. The judge also cast blame in Trump's direction after the verdict was announced. Quote, I think our democracy is in trouble, end quote, he said, adding that, quote, charlatans, end quote, like Trump, don't care about democracy, only about power. We have an expression on this channel with which all of you are already very familiar, and you know where I'm going with this, but sometimes just saying it is not enough. Today, I had to put it to a musical.
Confession through projection, yeah.
I read that statement from the judge, and I don't read it as an assessment of Donald Trump. I read it as an admission of the inner workings of this judge in particular. Quote, and as a result of that, it's tearing our country apart, end quote, the judge said.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
And if you had any doubt as to exactly how much trouble this defendant is in now that he's been convicted awaiting sentencing from this judge, well, the judge does not leave much room for doubt. Prosecutors did not ask for Thompson to be detained immediately, but Walton ordered him held and he was led away handcuffed. The judge said he believed Thompson was a flight risk and posed a danger to the public.
You serious?
Because everyone knows that coat racks and bottles of bourbon, that is gateway theft. You go from a coat rack and a bottle of bourbon straight to grand theft auto. Defense attorney Samuel Szymanski said Thompson hasn't avoided taking responsibility for his conduct that day. Quote, this shameful chapter in our history is all on TV, end quote, Szymanski told jurors. But he said Thompson, unemployed and consumed by a steady diet of conspiracy theories, was vulnerable to Trump's lies about a stolen election. He described Thompson as a, quote, pawn, end quote, and Trump as a, quote, gangster, end quote, who abused his power to manipulate supporters. Quote, the vulnerable are seduced by the strong, and that's what happened here, end quote, Szymanski said. Yep, with defense attorneys like that, I'm not even sure who needs a prosecutor in this case. Szymanski contended that Giuliani, the Trump advisor and former New York City mayor, incited rioters by encouraging them to engage in, quote, trial by combat, end quote, and that Trump provoked the mob by saying, quote, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. But prosecutor Dreher told jurors that neither Trump nor Giuliani had the authority to, quote, make legal, end quote, what Thompson did at the Capitol. Admittedly, it is easy for internet lawyer pundits and front seat law drivers to judge the work of others, but reading this, I get the impression it almost feels like the defense and the prosecution are working together here. Regardless, it's clear from the anonymous juror who immediately ran to the press that they were not impressed with the strategy by the defense. The juror who spoke on condition of anonymity said he was, quote, laughing under my breath, end quote, when Thompson testified he took the coat rack to prevent other rioters from using it as a weapon against police. Thompson was charged and convicted on 6 counts: obstructing Congress's joint session to certify the Electoral College vote, theft of government property, entering or remaining in a restricted building or grounds, disorderly or disruptive conduct in a restricted building or grounds, disorderly or disruptive conduct in a Capitol building, and parading, demonstrating, or picketing in a Capitol building. Although Thompson was unarmed, for some reason he was wearing a bulletproof vest, and I'm sure that did not rub the jury the right way. Thompson was wearing a bulletproof vest when he entered the building and went to the parliamentarian's office. The FBI said agents later searched Lyon's cell phone and found a video that showed a ransacked office and Thompson yelling, quote, woo, America, hey, this is our house, end quote. Quote, Trump didn't force you to go. He didn't force you to walk every step of the way to the Capitol building, did he, end quote, Dreher asked Thompson on Wednesday. Quote, no, end quote, Thompson said. Quote, you chose to do that, end quote, Dreher asked. Quote, I was following presidential orders, but yes, end quote, Thompson said. Yeah, I might feel that this is way over the top malicious prosecution to begin with, but my goodness.
That is not the best argument in your own defense.
I might have opted more for something along the lines of what the other defendant who was recently acquitted argued, that it looked like we were allowed in the building. Maybe that would not have gone quite so far under these circumstances given the evidence, but it's a little better of an argument than saying the president told me to do it. Especially when the president quite clearly did not tell you to do that. And on the issue of what many believe to be over-the-top prosecution in this case, the article concludes as follows. More than 770 people have been charged with federal crimes arising from the riot. Over 250 of them have pleaded guilty, mostly to misdemeanors. Thompson is the 5th person to be tried on riot-related charges. On Monday, a jury convicted a former Virginia police officer, Thomas Robertson, of storming the Capitol with another off-duty officer. Last month, a jury convicted a Texas man, Guy Reffitt, of storming the Capitol with a holstered handgun. A judge hearing testimony without a jury decided cases against 2 other Capitol riot defendants at separate bench trials. U.S. District Judge Trevor McFadden acquitted one of them on all charges and partially acquitted the other. Moral of the story, now that you've heard how at least one of the jury members tends to think in what seems to be pretty overt political bias, you might be better off opting for a bench trial with a judge and no jury, because at the very least, the record seems to be better for bench trials than jury trials for the defendants. Those are the latest developments of the events of January 6th, and while I think the prosecution is over the top, and I think the sentencing is going to be over the top in this particular case, there is that old expression, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. This guy played a stupid game, and unfortunately, he's winning a stupid prize. And with that said, if you like my videos, you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm.
More.
If you want to support the channel, all of these support links are in the pinned comment. We've got some great merch. You can follow Robert Barnes and me on Locals at
VivaBarnesLaw.locals.com.
All of my content is also on Rumble, where you can find a neat little widget that will bring you right to our Locals community if you are so inclined. But more important than anything, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Peace out. Booyah!